What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Spring Football Report. I am your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer, Dothan Wolves Football. It is championship week in the XFL. The XFL Championship game is this Saturday when the DC Defenders take on the Arlington Renegades for the second ever XFL Championship game. I know we don't see the current incarnation XFL talk about 2001. This is the second championship game. I've been waiting for this championship game since 2001 with the original XFL. But it's going to be a fun week, fun show here as well. We're going to be looking back at week 4 in the USFL, previewing the XFL championship game, and I have a guest that will be joining me in just a little bit to preview the XFL championship game. As I mentioned there, I've already said that several times here to open up the show. Pat Rifino, he covers the St. Louis Battlehawks, also the Michigan Panthers. You check him out over on XFL News Hub, USFL News Hub. He's a frequent guest over on the Mark Cast, and you check him out on YouTube, Analyze and Educate. So Pat will be on in just a little bit to preview the XFL Championship game. We will also talk about his alt football fandom, and we will get into his thoughts on USFL going through 4 weeks so far. As you guys know, you can find a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. The podcast, like I said, Apple Podcasts, follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Over on YouTube as well, hit subscribe button over at the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Hit subscribe button for all notifications, and please leave a comment on a video, and I'll also read those on a future edition as well. You can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Social media, pjordanscc. And you can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Now, let's get into the USFL Week 4 real quickly. Just some quick thoughts before I get Pat on the show. We're going to go through the 4 games in orders that they were played. Houston victorious, 41-16 over Philadelphia. Houston now winning back-to-back games after starting 2-2. I was really concerned with this team just from the turnovers they were committing in the first 2 games. Thrilling victory over Memphis, and then now you come with a dominant victory over Philadelphia. Like I said, 41-16. Look, I picked Philadelphia to win the USFL Championship before the season started. Obviously, I did not realize how bad the offensive line was going to be. Case Cookus just has no time. He was 24 of 36, 189, 1 touchdown, 1 interception in the game. The team as a whole had 40 yards rushing. Like I said, they just cannot protect him. He was sacked 6 times in the game. He's been sacked more times than any quarterback in the league. I really worry, too, with Case Cookus. Will he make it through the rest of the season without getting injured and them losing him? But on Houston, offensively, they were on point the entire game. They shredded both on the ground and in the air against the Stars defense. Running back Mark Thompson, 134 yards, 3 touchdowns on just 3 attempts. It was kind of interesting, too. He bounced a couple of them outside and had some success with that. Quarterback Kenji Bahar, 230 in the air, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, which is key. I talked about the turnovers with him. He was turning the ball over a little bit there the first couple of games. Really big there seeing him not turn the ball over. He left the game with a leg injury, so we'll see how that goes this week. Terry Wilson, former Kentucky quarterback, came in. Houston outscored Philadelphia 20-7 there in second. Houston got on board first, and then Philadelphia would answer it and make it 7-7. So you're thinking, watching this on Saturday, okay, this is going to be a close game, a really fun game here, or maybe Philadelphia is going to get a win here, take some momentum, but then no, Houston took all the momentum. So we'll see what Philadelphia does. They're 1-3 now. Some questions are being asked, and we'll see if they have answers. But Houston's playing really well right now with 2 straight victories. Memphis defeated Michigan 29-10 to get their first win of the year at 1-3. Michigan falls to 2-2. They've now lost 2 games in a row. The thing opened up with Memphis with 2 50-yard field goals by Alec Kessman. He also had a 37-yarder there in the third quarter. And I tell you, Memphis defensively had struggled the first 3 games. I mean, remember the just onslaught that they gave up on offense to Birmingham in week 2. Philadelphia had some success, and then last week Houston as well. But give them credit. The defense forced four turnovers in the game, a couple interceptions on both quarterbacks for Michigan, Josh Love and Carson Strong. One big one was there toward the end of the first quarter. Josh Love throws an interception in the red zone. Anthony Butler picked that one off, and then Memphis was able to capitalize on that, get a Cole Kelly rushing touchdown. And then also Carson Strong toward the end of the first half, they were in the red zone again. Look, you're in a situation too there where you don't turn the ball over, you at least get a field goal, but he throws it into the end zone. It was a great defensive play. It wasn't necessarily a bad pass, but the defender made a great play in Jermaine Kelly. He got interception. So there was opportunities there for Michigan there in the first half to put some points up, but they just didn't because of turnovers. Like I said, they committed 4. The biggest one, or perhaps one of the biggest ones, maybe not the biggest, I guess it depends how you look at it. Jeff McCulloch, a sack fumble that resulted in a score late as well. And Michigan 1 of 3 in the red zone. In this one, the quarterbacks for Michigan really weren't that great. Josh Love, 10 of 15 for 58 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then Carson Strong was 9 of 12, 76 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. The team did well in the running game with 127, but quarterback has got to be better. Josh Love was everybody's favorite. He was the darling for everybody after that first game of the season against Houston. He felt like he's falling back. Carson Strong's coming in. He wasn't all that effective either against Memphis, so we'll see. Going back to quarterback Cole Kelly for Memphis, wasn't great. It's not going to wow you, but he was 15 of 26, 151, no touchdowns, but no interceptions, and he had 2 rushing touchdowns in the game to get Memphis their first win of the year. On Sunday, New Orleans defeated New Jersey 20-17. So New Orleans is still undefeated, the only undefeated team in the USFL at 4-0. New Jersey falls to 2-2. They lost that first one to Birmingham. They start 0-1. They had 1-2 in a row that they dropped. This one really close game, really fun game to watch. I look at New Orleans, and they're just going to be a hard team to play defense against because you got McLeod Bethel-Thompson at quarterback. 7% of 26-37 passing on Sunday, 271. No touchdowns. He did 31 interceptions, but he was clutching in 3 complete passes on the eventual game-winner drive that led to a Matt Coughlin go-ahead 25-yard field goal with 7-10. So, and we've seen this, the opener against Pittsburgh and then also against Houston in the second game. McLeod Bethel-Thompson being clutch in the fourth quarter, making big throws, but also Wes Hills, he didn't rush for over 100 yards. He had 88 rushing, 71 through the air, 2 rushing touchdowns. He has 8 on the season, which leads to USFL. Another big performance on offense by tight end Sage Surratt. He had 6 receptions for 94 yards. So, but like I said, New Orleans are tough to stop offensively just because they can either beat you on the ground with Wes Hills or McLeod Bethel-Thompson. This team, to me, is the class of the league right now. They're by far the best team in the USFL. So kind of tease on when I give my power rankings in a second. For New Jersey, they're very limited what they can do passing. They're not going to be one of the better passing teams in the league. That's just who they are. They're going to be a defensive team, and they're going to run the ball. They run the ball well with Darius Victor and Trey Williams with 172 combined on the ground. They did have a big play in the passing game with Cam Eccles-Looper getting that 62-yard touchdown. That was 62 of the 113 yards that DeAndre Johnson had throwing through the air. I really felt this team does miss Luis Perez, who's playing in the XFL Championship game this week. With what he was with Mike Riley in the 2 quarterback system they had last year, Luis Perez was the passing quarterback, and then you had the Andre Johnson with the changeup, the dual threat. He can kind of give you a little bit of everything. So we'll see. We're 4 weeks in. We'll have 6 weeks left. Let's see how this New Jersey Generals passing game can evolve as the season does go on. And to close out the weekend, Birmingham defeated Pittsburgh 24-20. You'll hear me and Pat talk about this one. Birmingham improves to 3-1 coming off that loss the week before against New Orleans, and then Pittsburgh falls to 1-3. Pittsburgh moved the ball well in this game. Just they had to settle for field goals. They did finally score touchdowns toward the end. We'll get to that in a second. But Alex Magoo was forcing the issue very early in this one. 2 interceptions, one in the first quarter, one early in the second quarter. Luckily for Birmingham, defense stepped up. Pittsburgh was only able to kick field goals. They were up 9-0. So, and like I said, Pittsburgh was moving the ball. Troy Williams, I think, played well. 21 of 33, 217. But like I said, they couldn't get in the end zone. He ran for 63 yards. Then after the 2 interceptions, Birmingham, they made some plays offensively. Magoo had a rushing touchdown right when first half was expiring. Very risky play there that he couldn't get any points. So he go up 10-9 going into halftime. And then he kind of went Johnny Manziel a little bit with a touchdown pass to Davian Davis to go up 17-12 in the fourth quarter with 9:41 left. Just Magoo doing what he does, making plays with his feet. That's what he does. He's a playmaker. Like I said, first quarter and a half, he looked a little shaky, just forcing some things. But he did play better as the game went on. Davis, by the way, had 8 receptions in the game for 71 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, I'll go back to Troy Williams, 63 yards on the ground. He had a 34-yard rushing touchdown that put them up, along with a Isaiah Henney 2-point conversion, 20-17, 6:52 left. They kicked the ball off. It goes to Deion Kane, and he runs it back for 91 yards to go at 24-20, and then Birmingham's able to hold Pittsburgh on defense. So I'll say this, champions, good teams learn and figure out how to win when they do not play well, and that is what Birmingham did there in that one. They didn't play well. They had some miscues. They didn't look great offense all the time, but they found a way to win, which is an important thing. And with for Pittsburgh, I think this team is improving week in and week out, but they just have got to put some scores in the end zone as touchdowns, not as field goals. And so now my power rankings for after week 4 in the USFL. At number 8, I got Philadelphia. They're struggling. They're the worst team in the league, in my opinion. And a lot of it has to do with what they can't do up front defensively and offensively on the offensive line. Memphis, I'm going to put them at 7 at 1-3, getting that first win. Pittsburgh, 1-3. I think Pittsburgh's a little bit better than Memphis right now. Michigan, I've got them at 2-2 at number 5. Houston at 2-2 at 4. New Jersey, also 2-2 at 3. And that was tough. I actually did consider putting Houston at 3. I just like how they're playing. Birmingham at 3-1, and then you have New Orleans at 4. And so that is a look at USFL Week 4. Now let me bring in my guest, Pat Rifino, and let's talk about the XFL Championship game. Everybody, as you know, it is XFL Championship Week, and joining me to help preview this big game, the XFL Championship game, the first one since 2001, Pat Rifino. He covers the St. Louis Battlehawks. He covers Michigan Panthers as well in the USFL, XFL News Hub, USFL News Hub. You can check him out, which he was on Monday on the Markcast. You should go check that out, and also on YouTube, Analyze and Educate. Pat, I appreciate you taking time. You reached out. I'll reach out to anybody on Twitter, and then you reached back. I appreciate it. You coming on the show.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. I'm always glad to talk football.
Me too. I'm just so glad we have these leagues where football season doesn't end. It was like after the Super Bowl, I had friends say, "Man, Phil, what you going to do with football season?" And I was like, "What you talking about? Oh, football next week." But anyway, it is so great to have both these leagues, and we don't have a week without football, and that's the important part.
Yeah, I think it's like 20 weeks straight, I guess. I think, championship games first week of July for the USFL, and then, we go right into preseason. So depending on what you fancy, there's something for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about these leagues, and I always like to ask this with doing this show when I have guests on, just their history or their fandom. Where did your alt football fandom begin?
I mean, it really creeps into 2001. I was young. I was like 8 years old when the XFL 2001 was going on, and I liked the cheerleaders, and I thought Rodney Dangerfield was funny. And then you fast forward in 2009, there's a team called the New York Sentinels, and I believe they played at Hofstra. And I went to one of those games, so of the United Football League, which is one of my favorite football leagues. There's a great YouTube video about it. So then the Sentinels left. They became like the Hartford Colonials, but I still used to watch it on Versus all the time. Went into the service. Alt football wasn't really around. I got out of the service. And then the Fan Experimental Football League happened in 2014. And then when I got back from a contract, because I was an overseas contractor for a while, I would watch those games. They played at Coney Island. I think they were called like the Brooklyn Black Tips or something like that. I don't remember. And then I went back overseas for a couple of years straight, and my hours were real wonky. And I remember watching the AAF a lot too. And I became very fascinated by the Memphis Express because I was living in Cape Girardeau at the time, Missouri. And I really wanted to go to an Express game, and I bought a ticket, and then the league folded. So ended up, was overseas, did the whole 2019 thing overseas. It was December or January of 19 going into 20. The XFL is coming back, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Well, they have a St. Louis team. So I'm living a little bit up north in Missouri. I'm getting back from Afghan, and I'm like, I'm going to go to one of these games. I ended up going to a DC Defenders game, not DC, New York Guardians game in 2020. I don't remember who they played. Bought a ticket to go to the Battlehawks, and then the season's canceled. And so, broke my heart again. I ended up going back to New York for COVID response because I was a medic at the time. And, really, got back on the overseas contracting, in-state contracting. But I always loved football. I always wanted to be a football coach. I've coached here and there. And then in 2021, my bank account, because I was doing a lot of contracting, was decent enough to where I was like, man, I need to start transitioning to something other than like the medical side, the medic contracts or the security contracts I was doing. I was like, man, I'm not trying to do this. So I just started writing like on a blog. And I was writing about quarterbacks. I was writing about like Jake Fromm in 2021, writing about different stuff, studying a lot of the spread and what the spread is in the spread offense. Reading about Cliff Kingsbury and kind of like all the quarterbacks he had, Davis Webb, go down the list. And I sent a message to Matt Lyons, and I was like, hey, man, I wrote this. You want to give it a look? I'd love to write for you guys. I'll do it for free. And he was like, well, if you're good at something, don't do anything for free, one. And two, Matt Lyons put me in contact with Mark Perry, and that's how I started writing for News Hub. And I wanted to write for the Generals because I'm originally from New York. But that ended up not working out. And because Mike Mitchell does a way better job than I'll ever do. And I ended up writing about the Michigan Panthers. And, I've been to Michigan twice. So obviously it was a natural fit. And then from there, the XFL started. And, I've always been very, intrigued because, you get this gets talked about a lot in baseball a lot is you get a player, a 4A player, right? Someone who's not good enough for the majors, but too good for AAA. And I love these guys continuing to play at this level, make a little bit of money, be able to support their families and then do whatever they want for the eight months,
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my, condensed cliff notes of like how I started knowing about these leagues.
I'm glad you mentioned the UFL because I really enjoyed that. I think with the UFL and the quality of play is right there with what I think we see, especially the first 2 years. What we see now with the XFL and USFL. I mean, you remember year two, the quarterbacks. I mean, you had Jeff Garcia and Dante Culpepper in the league.
oh man, I can go down this rabbit hole. You have Jeff Garcia, you have Dante Culpepper, Josh McCown, Brooks Bollinger, Chris Greisen, McLeod Bethel Thompson was in that league. Brian Johnson, who's a coach now, Jared Johnson, Jeremiah Masoli. There's another, and that's just a quarterback. So you had Dede Dorsey was a part of that team. Graham Gano, who's an all-league kicker. Matt Overton, an all-league long snapper. So many of these guys got their start in there and through coaching as well. If you look at some of these coaches, there's a lot of UFL backgrounds. Matt Wilhelm, who he's played on the 49ers and I think the Seahawks, got his start with the Omaha Nighthawks and was a linebackers coach for a couple of years.
Yeah, that was amazing league. The time of year, I think, that just wasn't good for, all football.
You had to be there.
Yeah, if you didn't watch it, you didn't know how good it was, or you didn't really hear about it because the TV didn't help. They couldn't get a good TV partner because of the time of year either.
Did I mention Jeff Garcia was also in that league? Did I say him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Golly.
Yeah, it was.
Pat White was a part of that league. So many guys, man, that Denzel Washington's son was in that league. I
remember that. I think they interviewed him during one of the games, I know they would show him. So I remember
the neon green colors were something else to tell you, man. It was just such a ridiculous experience, and you loved it. You had to be there, and I was so glad that I was still young enough to where it was so mysterious to me, and to see it. And I remember when they did it, they all came out in their uniforms. And I was like, this is ridiculous, but I'm all about it. Jim Haslett was a coach. Bart Andrus was a coach. Jeff Jaggs, he's on Bart's staff now, and he was a head coach at one point. So it was a lot of good football. It was a lot of good. It's a good resume builder, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every time I watch a Seattle Sea Dragons game and I see Jim Haslett over there on the sideline, I just remember when he was the coach of the Florida Tuskers. That was the team. I've always had
6-0 led by Jets legend Brooks Bollinger, man.
That's it. So I think we could probably go through this, do a whole podcast on just the memories of these leagues.
Let me throw this in real quick and let's do it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I started in 01 too. I watched a little bit NFL Europe before that and a little bit arena ball, but the XFL 2001 kind of started, and then it was like arena football and everything else after that. But XFL Championship game, I'll probably going in. Everybody said 4-6. Arlington had no shot against Houston, but they come out with a win, and they'll be playing the best team in the league all year, the 9-1 DC Defenders. Just you hear the matchup. This matchup this Saturday night on ABC, 7:00 Central Time. Just what comes to mind? What's the biggest thing you're looking for with this matchup? These two.
Let's see what Luis Perez can do. He's the spring king, as people would say. He's played in AAF. He's played football every year since 2019. The AAF, some NFL stints, XFL 2.0, the Spring League, USFL, and he's had success at every level. And it's great to see him kind of take, when life gives you lemons, you go to the XFL Championship game, providing a spark. He threw over 300 yards in one of his starts this year. It took him a while to get, to get his feet under him, but he's playing some of his better football. He's limited physically, not the most athletic guy. Has trouble hitting the out routes, but they got a great defense. Donald Payne's there, Joe Powell, Will Hill, Darnell Sankey, Tomasi Loai on the defensive line, and some professionals at offensive line. And I was talking with someone at the Battlehawks today, and something that gets lost is they made a transition to put Brian Folkritz, an NFL professional, who played on the Battlehawks in 2020. They put him at center, I believe, and that's kind of changed some things as well because you got him, Cameron Hunt, Garrett McGinn on that offensive line. Garrett McGinn and Cameron Hunt are two all USFL linemen, and you don't sleep on Arlington. To be honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me if they lost because we've seen the job that Reggie Barlow, Fred Kais, and Von Hutchins built a great team, but Greg Williams have done. But if Arlington snuck this out, and not to sound cliche, any given Sunday, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And I was looking today when I was getting prepped for this conversation with Arlington, and look at Luis Perez, 2-2 as starter. If you count the playoff game with his record. 68%. I mean, this team is averaging 200, barely over 250 yards passing per game with him as quarterback. Before that, it was in the 150s with Drew Plitt and Kyle Sloter. But I was looking at their run game since week 5. They've been a pretty solid running team, over 100 yards a game. They have shown balance. I think you look at the record, and yes, they weren't winning games the second half of the year, but that team's got a certain kind of balance with that offense, particularly now with Luis Perez there at quarterback.
I agree. Perez is a calming force. There was definitely some disgruntledness with Kyle Sloter. I think the Drew Plitt thing comes from Jonathan Hayes and his connections to the Cincinnati Bengals. And I don't think Kyle had as much of a shot to start as we all want him to do, especially guys with USFL bias. But it just didn't seem like it was clicking, and that there was a lot of issues because, where Stoops comes from in Oklahoma and everything like that. So we see what's going on, and in my opinion, it was just needed some fresh blood. I was really big into Kevin Anderson, their third-string quarterback. I'm a big fan of him. I thought they should have went to him before Perez, but, I was wrong, obviously, and maybe that's more of a me problem than a a Renegades problem. It shows that Bob Stoops, who's won 197 or 6 games as a head coach, knows a little bit more about football than me. But in the end, it's a decent story. A lot of controversy with Arlington, but they're going to have to bring their A game to go against DC. And I know we're talking a lot about Arlington, but what's there left to say about DC? Mm-hmm. They figured it out in the passing attack. Chris Blair, Lucky Jackson, and then a jubilee of tight ends who are just who are you picking? Briley Moore, Alex Ellis, Ethan Wolf, and then you got the all XFL running back there. And then we can talk hours about Te'amu.
Yeah, and Jordan Te'amu. Look, obviously, I'm in SEC country. I remember in Ole Miss. I remember just as a backup quarterback, Shea Patterson was the guy, the 5-star, one of the best quarterback recruits coming in by Hugh Freeze, current Auburn head coach. But then Te'amu comes in. I mean, Shea Patterson, I believe he got hurt, bench, whatever happened. And then Te'amu just actually played better than Shea Patterson and has proven to be a better quarterback professionally than Shea Patterson. But, this year, I remember early in the year, it was DC seen our offense was all about the run game. That pass game has really evolved as the season's gone on. And now it feels like they're more of a passing team than they are a run team, which that run is what they want to do. But they're so dangerous. And like you mentioned, the receivers, they don't get talked about enough because of the running game. But that passing game has really evolved as the season's gone on.
Kais did a good job of changing the offense a little bit, in my opinion. More tight ends, more rolling out, more RPOs and whatnot for Te'amu. I'd have to look back at the film, but even because I had him coming into the season, he was my number 1 quarterback coming in. And a lot of that was because he has a sample size in spring league, right? We didn't know what Ben was going to do. We didn't know what AJ was going to do. So you respect the pedigree of those other guys, but you also understand they haven't really played football in a while. I don't think AJ's last start was 2019 with the Texans, and then he got hurt in 2021. I was high on DiNucci coming in because of each year in the preseason he got better. and he looked like a better quarterback. But Jordan, has been playing competitive football against guys who are giving it their all because this is it, for them in the XFL. He took a big step back in 2022. He led the league in touchdowns and passing yards, but, man, he got sacked a lot. And outside of Jaron Jones on that USFL team, there wasn't really anyone else. Bruno Reagan got hurt, and there wasn't much else we could do for Teamu. But to see him mature and be more comfortable and not always take off, because in the beginning, the first 4 games, he would get real giddy if his first option wasn't there and then just take off. And now he's looking at his tight ends more, getting more comfortable because they're rolling him out. And now he's seeing a couple more options to where he can hit Blair down deep or he can dump it off to Ethan Wolf. And, he's not reading the full field, and that's going to be his, boogaboo going to the next level. But right now he's he doesn't need to do that. And they're winning games and he's playing great.
Yeah, and just the way he takes care of the ball, which is actually an interesting matchup for me in this game because Arlington leads the league in interceptions. But Jordan Ta'amu and this DC team doesn't turn the ball over, which a turnover is kind of what helped Arlington get back into it a few weeks ago when they beat them 28-26. DC won that one. Any matchups like that for you that we haven't talked about you're looking for in the game?
I mean, you gotta respect a guy like Joe Powell. He's a dynamic player. He's a veteran. They got those 2 vets back there, man. Will Hill will come up in the box too. There's some games you look at the box score and Will Hill's pumped you for about 8-9 tackles from the safety position. Not too wowed about their cornerbacks, but Joe Powell, an athletic freak, has made some very acrobatic interceptions this year. And, if they're going to win, they're going to need it from those 2 vets, 2 guys from NFL experience, alt league experience, and both guys from the Battlehawks, from 2020. So if they win, I look from a big game from Joe Powell or Will Hill. But, Darnell Sankey has been one of the best in-season additions to any XFL team. It's a pleasure to watch him play.
Real quickly before we transition to a little bit of the USFL, and if you don't want to, if you're going to write an article about this later in the week, it's fine. But do you have a prediction for the game? Man,
I don't know. I mean, I think DC is going to win, but I don't know. I can't put a number on the score. I can't put I can't give you a reason why other than what we talked about as far as what one team can do or the other. I can't, if you had a gun to my head, let's go DC 28-20.
I think a lot of people would be happy if the season could end on just a good game, a good note, because I do remember.
Yeah, they have to, because for the sake of the league, the Renegades need to play well. They don't have to win; they just need to be competitive.
Well, and I do remember the last XFL Championship game was a dead of a game when the LA Extreme blew out the San Francisco Demons. Let's hope for the better one than way back over 20 years ago. And real quick, I told you 20 minutes. We're at the 20-minute mark. But USFL, we're coming out of week 4. Interesting. It looks like New Orleans is right now the class of the league, the best team in the league. Birmingham sits there at 3-1. But that was kind of a struggle victory, I think, on Sunday night against Pittsburgh. But just overall, when you look at the league, what are your thoughts after 4 weeks of the USFL?
I mean, I think the play is good. I'm not concerned with the quarterback play. I think some stars have come out. The offensive line play is a little bit underwhelming for me, and that's a big fear because I don't think we're getting the full grasp of the quarterbacks. There are some guys who, man, this is just a quick pit stop for them, and they'll be in an NFL camp, or once the injuries start coming, they'll transition to an NFL, tryout or something like that. But something that really impresses me is the receivers in the league. Because you look down each roster and you're like, man, there's at least 1 or 2 guys that could have an NFL shot. And then because we've seen some receivers go to the NFL, go to the XFL, that next wave is coming up. Like Isaiah Henney on the Maulers is proving how versatile he is. Deion Kane he's an NFL guy, but he wasn't really returning kicks, and now he's putting himself on a pedestal to have an opportunity. So I think the receiver position and the tight end position for me has been the most impressive thing I've seen on multiple different teams.
Yeah, you talking about offensive line play, and I really am concerned about that when I watch Philadelphia play because Case Cookus is just getting blown up game after game. I mean, he looks like he was banged up a couple weeks ago, and now I kind of worry for him that will he even finish the season with that offensive line in Philadelphia?
I don't think he will because they lost two key pieces. They lost Gunnar Vogel and they lost Alex Akingbulu. And Vogel's in the XFL. I don't remember what team he's on. And Akingbulu is now with the Commanders. He didn't play this year, but he finished the season on the active roster for Washington. And losing those two guys, we're talking about NFL caliber guys, is a big loss. Their center, Chris Perez, is very inexperienced. I was told today that he was a tight end at JUCO and then transitioned to center, and it looks like they're having a lot of issues with calls because oftentimes I'll see the guard, a guy will be in a one technique and the right guard will, shade over to him, and then the linebacker will come right through. And I'm like, man, you can't even put a hand on him, or the protections where the linebacker is getting picked up by, they're double teaming a defensive lineman, and then the linebacker is getting picked up by the running back. And I'm like, hey, man, I get you can do that in certain pass pros, but it's not working. We got to adjust. Have the running back, put an H-back in the backfield or something like that. You got to do something to give Cookus time because he's not able to step into his throws. He's frazzled. He's hurt. And, it just seems like all the other teams got better and Philadelphia stood fast. And that's another team with a good receiving core.
Yeah, I'm feeling bad through 4 weeks. I picked them as the USFL champion. I fell in love with the fact that Case Cookus was back and just what he did last season. And just last week with the USFL, just obviously, like I said, New Orleans, they're the undefeated team 4-0. Who do you see as second best team in the league right now? Is it Birmingham or is it maybe one of the teams out of the North?
I go Birmingham. Michigan's got to show me a little bit more. New Jersey has to show me a little bit more. I like Birmingham because they did not play their best football this week, and they still won. And oftentimes when you're, no matter what, good teams find ways to win. And Alex Magoo, he was getting coached hard this week, and he still figured it out. And that's the thing when he's so athletic. And he's got the arm strength, and he underthrew some passes, and it was disappointing. But in the end, he's able to improvise enough to where, he had a nice rushing touchdown and then a nice passing touchdown, just kind of doing the Houdini thing.
Yeah, like you said, that's always a good thing. If you can just figure out a way to win, because you're not always going to play your best game, but if you can figure out a way to win, that's always a sign of a winning team. And Pat, this has been fun having you on, talking about XFL, USFL, threw some UFL talk there at the beginning. But if the listeners and the viewers want to check you out online, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at @Rifino. I keep it pretty football there. On Instagram, Pat from Cali, so you can see kind of what a little bit more about from me. I'm not from California, just someone said that once, and I thought it was funny. And then on YouTube, I'm Analyze and Educate. I do a lot of interviews. I do a lot of quarterback rankings. And my interviews are usually in person. I got a nice little studio set up that, we've been putting a lot of work into. And I got some good guests that have come on. Terry Myrick and we had a good conversation of the Panthers. Clint Sig of the Gamblers was on my show. Mike Glass actually had an emergency trip to Michigan, so we did a Zoom. And Jed Stugart, head coach of a Division I team, Lindenwood University, where Pierre Desir and Dee Dorsey played. He's up there. He's on there. And then today I just posted a Zoom. It was a last-second thing with a couple of the all XFL guys. So check it out.
All right, everybody, go check out all of Pat's work. And Pat, I appreciate the time, and hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
All right, and once again, thanks to Pat Rifino for coming on the show, talking about his alt football fandom. We started to go down a rabbit hole there with the UFL. Probably could have gone a lot more, but hey, we're here to preview the XFL Championship game. And we talked about that, obviously, in a little USFL after a full week. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Pat, and go give him a follow on social media with all the great work he's doing. So now, my pick, we're getting into picks now. XFL Championship game and USFL Week 5. We're going to do XFL Championship game first. Look, I'm excited about this. This is, for me, this is kind of like 2001, been waiting for this. Another XFL Championship game, of course, in 2020. We got 5 weeks of XFL football, then the pandemic kind of shut that down. So I've been really looking forward to this. It's really kind of dawned on me. This is a big deal. I thought that was a big deal back then. LA Extreme won 38-6. Was not a fun game to watch unless you were an LA Extreme fan back then. So I'm going to play a little throwback from that XFL Championship game, and this audio clip is courtesy. It comes from the original XFL, NBC, the WWF. I'm trying to cover all my bases here so I don't get in any trouble for playing this. But I just want to play this for you guys. It's a little blast from the past, from how the 2001 XFL Championship game opened.
Some would have you believe tonight's XFL Championship game is meaningless. Just a handful of athletes playing for $1 million. Don't dare tell that to San Francisco's Scott Adams. Anchoring the Demons' offensive line, he spent the entire season banging heads in the trenches, all the time honoring his father's memory by wearing his dad's bootlace on his wrist. Tonight, Scott dedicates this game to his father. LA's Saladin McCullough doesn't buy that meaningless nonsense either. A player of exceptional talent, Saladin prayed for a second chance, and it came as the XFL. Vindication comes with a championship tonight. 35-year-old Dwayne Harper played 13 seasons in the NFL. In training camp, he searched his soul as to why he was still playing. The answer? He's never won a championship. And then there are the quarterbacks. LA's Tommy Maddox was a #1 draft pick that never panned out, or so it seemed. Away from the game a couple of years, he's back. Wiser, stronger, more mature. In short, better than ever. A victory tonight certifies it all. San Francisco's Mike Pawlowski knows what it means to sacrifice. Mike plays with a fused spine, unwilling to walk away from the game he loves. Tonight, Mike risked it all again for a title shot. The stories go on, each one more heroic than the next. So tonight, while these two teams battle for the title, know that it's not just about the money. Know that it's really about honor, about pride, about the opportunity to be called champion.
And you know, when you hear that, it just kind of connect with what we're doing here in 2023 too as well. It's not called $1 million game. They're not playing for $1 million like that, but just these stories, these players, and it's all, you know, coming to a head with this championship game. Luis Perez at quarterback, just his story, all the spring leagues he's been in, everything you've seen with DC, Jordan Tommy at quarterback. I mean, I'm focusing on the quarterbacks, I know, but there's plenty of great stories here with these guys. We saw it throughout the season with A.J. McCarron, just the city of St. Louis. Look what DC, I mean, this is, so I think you hear that, that's from 2001, but I do think it does relate to this game and this league and what has happened in the success of the 2023 XFL season. So here's my preview. We went over a little bit with Pat, so some of the stuff will be repeat of what I said there. But let's look at the Arlington offense versus the DC defense. Luis Perez has been a calming force for Arlington. Arlington, before he took over as quarterback, which he's been the last 4 games, including playoff game, 2-2. Before that, this team was averaging 13.2 points per game and only putting up 152.7 yards per game through the air. Since he's become a quarterback, big difference. 19.8 points per game and 254.8 yards per game in the air. In those 4 games, he's 68%, 1,019 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Now, he was throwing some more interceptions earlier when he was with Vegas, but he has played really well in their playoff game, their playoff when he gets Houston, and the 26-11 victory, going 19-27, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 289 yards. Going into that game, my big concern was how will the offensive line hold up? Houston is the best team in the league at getting after quarterback. He got sacked 1 time. Protection was really good. And as a team, Arlington was 9 of 14 on third down, which is something I always look at any football game. How did you do on third down? They were tremendous there. Since week 5, though, and this is one thing, too, as well, we all talk about Luis Perez, and I mentioned this with Pat. Since week 5, Arlington is averaging 102.6 yards per game on the ground. Davion Smith has been the guy leading the way with that, with 365 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, going up against this DC team, what am I looking for defensively? Now, DC, I'll say this points-wise. On the year, they're giving up 24 points per game. Second half of the season, I think their defense has taken a step back. They've had some games where they've really struggled. They gave up 37 to Orlando in their 1 loss. Against this Arlington team a few weeks ago, they were up 26-9. And then Arlington came back and tied it and sent it to overtime. Last week of the season against San Antonio, they had a big lead, 19-3. San Antonio came back. They almost had a chance to win it. They missed a field goal at the end. So you look at this DC defense, they have struggled, but what they are good at is getting after quarterback. Second in the XFL in sacks. So that's kind of like the same thing I was talking about when Arlington played Houston. That was something looked at. How do they protect Perez? They protect Perez. That's going to be big in this game. But if not, it's going to be an issue because, and as I mentioned there with Pat, Perez is not a athletic quarterback. If he gets pressured, he's going to go down. He's not known for his running ability. So that's the big thing. You've got to keep Perez upright so he can run the offense. He doesn't have the greatest arm in the world, not the strongest arm, but he's a good quarterback. He does great things. He's got good enough arm strength. So that's going to be my key there on that matchup. Now, when it comes to DC's offense versus the Arlington defense is really good at intercepting the passer. Led the league with 13 interceptions. Joe Powell had 4 on the season. But when you look at DC, Jordan Thompson, quarterback, is really good at protecting the ball. 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's a 62% passer. Third in the XFL this season with 1,847 yards. And then, of course, they had the changeup with De'Aaron King that comes in. He runs it as well. 5 rushing touchdowns. This is the best rushing team in the league. They ran for 1,408 yards. Abram Smith, the league's leading rusher, at 791 and 7 touchdowns. Very, very underrated at receiver here. Lucky Johnson, Josh Hammond, Chris Blair, 2 at receivers. So they have a great receiving core. They get the tight ends involved. So for Arlington defensively, it's also going to be key. Find a way to put pressure on Tiamu and maybe force a interception. Because part of the big comeback when Arlington was making plays to get back in the game against DC a few weeks ago when they did play was they had a big interception. They caused a turnover. They're going to need to do that this game. I believe if DC does not kind of help Arlington in some situations, I think it's going to be tough for Arlington to come out with a victory here. So where do I go? What's my pick? I'm picking DC to win this game. You heard Pat give a prediction of 28-20. I'm going to go with, I actually think there's going to be more points than that. I think DC wins this game. I'm going to go more 31-23. I do think it's close. I think Arlington keeps it close, which is going to be very important because it's a team with a losing record. They need this to be a close game. This does not need to be a blowout. It'd be not a good look for the league. But I am going to go with DC to win the title in this one. And then let's close things out with some USFL picks real quickly. On Saturday, we'll kick things off with Pittsburgh Maulers 1-3 versus Michigan Panthers at 2-2. 11:30 a.m. Central Time on USA. Michigan is a 3.5-point favorite here. The over/under is 42.5. I do not like the way Michigan's playing right now. Last week, offense has seemed bad. Pittsburgh, I do believe, has gotten better. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to go with upset pick here. I think the Maulers will upset the Panthers in this one. The Houston Gamblers at 2-2 will be at the Birmingham Stallions, who are 3-1. 3 p.m. on Fox. Birmingham is a 4.5-point favorite. The over/under is 49.5. Birmingham struggled. They found a way to win. They'll be at home. Houston's playing well. I think Birmingham's the better team. I think who they were last week or this past week against Pittsburgh is not who they are. I don't believe they'll make those same mistakes. I am going to go with Birmingham to win this one. And then on Sunday, the New Jersey Generals 2-2 will be playing the Philadelphia Stars, who's 1-3, 11 a.m. Central over on NBC. New Jersey is a 6.5-point favorite. Over/under is 43.5. Given New Jersey, I like their defense, their running game, and those are two issues with Philadelphia. I think they'll get pressure on Cookus, and I don't think they'll be able to run the ball. So I'm going to go with New Jersey to win that one. And then finally, the Memphis Showboats at 1-3 will be playing New Orleans 4-0, 2 o'clock on Fox. New Orleans is a 7-point favorite, 47.5 over/under. New Orleans will not make the same mistakes, and they will not give the ball up like Michigan did. McLeod Bethel-Thompson does a pretty good job. I know he had an interception this past week, but he does a pretty good job protecting the ball. So I think New Orleans wins. I have to think New Orleans could win that one big. So that's my picks. So give me Pittsburgh Maulers, give me the Birmingham Stallions, give me the New Jersey Generals, and the New Orleans Breakers this week. And that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Spring Football Report. Once again, thanks to Pat Rifino. Had a great time talking with him. I'll be back next week. We'll recap USFL Week 5 and the XFL Championship game on the show next week. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is on Twitter as well at Spring FB Report. You can find a podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcast, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check it out over at the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Just subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on a video, and I'll read it on a future edition as well. Follow me on social media at PJordan SEC. You can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. If you're into college football, check out my written work and my other at Last Word College Football and my other podcast, The Phillip Jordan Show. Anyways, I hope everybody enjoys the XFL Championship game, enjoys the USFL games this week. Until next week, bye-bye.